This video will introduce Project 2, which is to create a recipe card. As you know from the introduction of this course, we're going to work on four sort of three mini projects that will build into the final project, which is to create a recipe cookbook. So this is just part of that project, and the point of this is to sort of learn how to use InDesign tables. They're really great ways of organizing information, especially if you have lists or things that you just kind of want to keep as a table or chart, that kind of thing. So in this project, you will be creating a blank recipe card. I know in the world of digital, a lot of people probably don't use these anymore, but I still think it's something that's viable, and I still think it's something that people use, the grandmas and moms, and pass them down from generation to generation. And people, I think, still like the old analog way of sort of storing and organizing information. So with your blank recipe card, you're going to design it in a way that the person who uses this recipe card will basically be filling in the recipe information. So you're not filling in the information. You basically just need to have recipe name, the prep time, the cooking time, the number of servings, an ingredient list, and then a space to write the directions. So you really should do some research on what recipe cards look like. I've included some ideas here. This is the first time students are working on this project, so I don't have any student examples to put here for now, but these kind of give you a good idea of the types of recipe cards that could be created. This is not the correct format, but I just liked the way they used a simple color. The text is kind of nice and clean, so you don't have to go crazy with these. But then basically you want to show how well you can organize content using tables in InDesign. So you'll use InDesign, the color palette. You can make them just black and white, but you could also do full color. If you do full color, you want to make sure you set your file up as CMYK. But as you can see here, in all cases, whether there's color or it's black and white, you want to make sure that the background is light enough that whoever is filling in this card, that you can see the information, if they're writing in pen or even pencil for that matter. So you wouldn't want to do dark colors by any means. The X card size should be 6 inches by 4 inches, so it's horizontal. And then you will be, designing your recipe icons for Project 1. So I'd like to see you use at least 3 of your recipe icons from that project in this, and I'll kind of show you what I mean by that. So you'll have a usable blank recipe card that's created and saved in InDesign. And then you'll submit both your InDesign file and a high quality PDF. And this is due in Module 3 on Sunday. So that's sort of a high overview of the project. And I'm going to kind of show you quickly how to set up your InDesign file, but also, you'll be doing some LinkedIn Learning tutorials that will go over the project and using tables and all the different ways you can use those tables. So definitely watch those too, and we'll start this project with sketches. So your sketches will be due this in this module 2, and then these won't be due until you get to module 3. So I'm going to go ahead and go to InDesign, and I'm going to set up a new file. And I'm going to go to print, and then I'm going to make sure I change to inches. And I'm going to set my file up to 6 inches by 4 inches. And then I don't want facing pages, because if you remember, facing pages have 2 pages right next to each other as a spread, and we don't want that in this case. And I just really need, I'm going to make this 3 pages, because you will be doing, and this is going to be for, really you're going to start this next week, but you can refer back to this video. And then because it's a relatively small size, I'm going to make my margins 1/4 of an inch, and you can always change this later. And always make sure you set your bleed. Even if you don't think you're going to have anything that kind of goes outside of that trim area, I always set a bleed just so that it's there if I do need it. And I'm going to hit create. So this is basically how you will set up your InDesign file. And this is going to be after you do sketches. So you probably, again, won't get to this until module 3, but you can refer back to this video as you begin to set up your file. And then following along the InDesign tables from LinkedIn Learning, you'll see that, you basically are just setting up, I'm drawing a text box, and you go to table, insert table, and this is where you set your cells, your columns. Really you just need sort of ingredients and directions. So you would just do probably a 2-column. You can always add later. And remember, this would say ingredients, this would say directions. Remember that with tables, you always use the text tool to sort of move things around and make things different sizes. Your directions spot obviously will be a lot longer than your ingredients spot. And I'm just kind of, moving things around. And remember, your table is basically text inside of another box. So always remember, you will have this bounding box. So even if you make this box bigger, it's not going to make your table bigger. To do that, you want to go back to your text tool and stretch it out. Another thing to remember, and I'm not going to, go over things. I want you guys to kind of do this stuff, but remember that when you are working with your table, there is the table options and the cell options. So as when you have your text tool and you click in here, remember that your cell options, if you click there, you get a pop-up that kind of goes over your text, your graphics, your stroke and fills, your rows and columns. I've never even messed with this diagonal lines, but with your text, remember you can align your text within that cell centered, bottom, vertically. So these are all your options for your designing your text cells. And the last thing I wanted to just point out is I'm going to bring in one of the little icons that I created in the first project tutorial. And obviously I should not have put it into that cell. So I'm going to Command Z, and there it is. And so this is sort of where I want you to, try to use at least three of your icons in here. It could be next to your recipe name. You could have it sort of at the top of your ingredients. But I'm just going to kind of crop in on this icon. And this is sort of where I mentioned you want to make sure that those icons can be small. So I'm just going to size this down a little bit. Remember in InDesign, it's kind of funky. You have to hit Command and Shift to size something down like this. But if you look at this icon, I'm going to go to View Actual Size. And you can see how this, gets pretty small, but you could have your icon there. It could say recipe name, or just, recipe. Another thing you want to realize is some of this will not be set in a table. You'll just have your text sort of out, and you can either add strokes, or one of the things that I do, and I'm going to try to find a nice condensed typeface, make that a little bit bigger. One of the things I sometimes do to add lines is I'll just use the underline key. So if you go Shift and use that underline key, sometimes you'll see you can't really control necessarily the spaces in between, or maybe you think that this is too bold. So you could find another typeface that actually makes solid lines. You can see here some of these actually make solid lines. So you can change, your typeface to a solid line, but that is sometimes an option if you wanted to be able to fill in. But your recipe and cook time and all that kind of stuff, that could be set up as a table. I really want you guys to experiment with how far you can push these, how much you can use those tables, and that sort of thing. So this is just a rough overview. Those LinkedIn Learning videos will really help you get started as well. But I really want you to kind of, we'll start this project with sketches and sketch a few ideas and go from there. So as always, if you have any questions after you watch this introduction video, please feel free to email me. But I think you should, do a great job with this project, and I'm looking forward to seeing the solutions you all come up with.